This is Talk to Seattle, and I'm your host, Jason Rigden. On this episode, I have Phil Tavel, who's running for Seattle City Council in the 1st District. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing pretty good. Could you tell me a little bit about yourself, maybe your background and experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So I come from an interesting family. Both of my parents are physicists. Grew up on a college campus, actually back east, and I was a physics major in college and actually taught high school and adult and a little college physics before I went and worked for the National Science Foundation as a science education analyst. And then I went to law school thinking I'd be a patent attorney, ended up falling in love with criminal law and actually trial law, worked for the Manhattan DA for a little while, then moved out to Seattle where I thought I would go right into the law and ended up actually getting a job at Nintendo and took an 8-year detour into the video game industry where I actually had a video game company called Interactive Imagination that was in Pioneer Square. That whole travel actually took me to Australia for a couple of years, and I opened a games and collectibles store down there and lived in Melbourne, which is actually Seattle's sister city. Lived there for 2.5 years before coming back here. When I came back, ended up getting a job at DeVry University, becoming the national curriculum manager for a new bachelor's degree program in video game and simulation programming. Did that for a little while, and then finally took the bar exam. And after I passed it, I volunteered with the public defender here in King County, and literally fell in love with that job, and became a full-time public defender. And for the last 14 years, primarily been a public defender. I've been a pro tem district court judge in King County as well, and I do a whole lot of civic things besides that. But that is the path that brought me to where I am today.
And so what made you decide to run for office, specifically this position?
Well, it was interesting is back in 2011, my son was about to be born, and I adore this city, but I'd always thought that there was so much potential in this town that went unrealized. You know, we've got all of these companies that are iconic, that are changing the face of our planet, but I didn't feel like they were changing the face of Seattle in the same way. And I started looking into politics, and I actually went to this thing, the Wellstone Academy, to learn about being either an activist or a campaign manager or a candidate. And I really liked the idea, and I actually looked at running for city council back in 2011, but a very intelligent political consultant told me that I probably should not be running for office right at the same time my first child was being born, which turned out to be brilliant advice. And then a couple years later, a group of public defenders approached me about running for district court judge. There was a judge who just was not very good, and a lot of people wanted to see him replaced. And I ran for that, and that was in 2014. And what happened was, going through that process, doing a full city of Seattle race, I got a firsthand glimpse at some of the dysfunctional politics in this city. And I didn't win the judicial race, but it made me realize that I wanted to do something more than just operate from the bench. And when the next year, when we went to districts, and then Tom Rasmussen from West Seattle, when he decided not to run for the District 1 seat, I thought it was a perfect opportunity. And so I had an amazing time running then, and I, again, realized so much of the problems that we have here in Seattle are created by just the way our government functions and the way our city departments silo. And, you know, there was a lot of things that I thought could change. And so I ran, and I finished third, which was good, almost had 19% of the vote. And then for the last 4 years, I've just stayed as civically involved as possible. And to be honest, I haven't seen anything improve in the last 4 years, which is why a group of people in West Seattle approached me last summer to say, "So Phil, are you going to run again?" And when I realized that I was going to have more support this time than last time, I said yes, and here I am.
And could you tell me a little bit about your district?
Oh, absolutely. So District 1 is West Seattle, Delridge, Highland Park, South Park. This is where Seattle began, down on Alki Beach with a couple of brothers coming from Brooklyn. It has got incredible history. We're, sort of a bastion of progressive liberalhood. And what's interesting is, over time, there's also been added a little bit of a conservative string through there as well. And we've got, these iconic businesses like Salty's and Husky Deli, and we've got Lincoln Park, and we have Seattle's only working farm down in South Park, which is where the whole Pike Place market really began. So, we've got industry, we've got Terminal 5 and Harbor Island, we've got a college. It is an absolutely amazing part of the city, and it's where I fell in love with it. A friend of mine, brought me here when I had gone to college and law school with him, and I literally just fell in love with West Seattle. So I took my last law school exam, loaded up a Ryder truck, and two friends and I moved all the way across country to a new place, which is now District 1.
And what are some of the biggest challenges facing your district?
I would say right now, the district itself, one of the big things is the Sound Transit 3 program and trying to figure out exactly what that's going to look like. There's a bit of a fight right now to try to get a tunnel option that would go under the Pigeon Point area and be an underground tunnel for light rail into the Alaska Junction, rather than what is being pushed right now is a giant raised light rail that would put a 100+ foot concrete monster right down the middle of West Seattle. So that's one of the things. I mean, West Seattle obviously is also dealing with homeless issues and, rises in some property crimes and people on the street who are going unsupported and undiagnosed with mental health and substance abuse issues. We don't have the same numbers as the rest of Seattle. Our number of homeless is, over 200, but it's not like the rest of the city. So it's a microcosm of that overall problem, but it's a little different. People have a lot of focus right now on just some of the small infrastructure issues, like just getting potholes fixed and crosswalks put in where they're needed, and a couple of turnabouts that are needed. And I think also just supporting small businesses, small business is very much the backbone of the culture in West Seattle. And our city has just, been putting more and more on those small businesses rather than really truly promoting prosperity and listening to what they need to help grow a community. So I think that's a big issue. But I think in general, District 1, a lot of people have told me as I've been on the doors that they just want to see the issue with people who are suffering on the street just better taken care of.
And what do you think are the biggest issues facing the city as a whole?
I mean, right now, the biggest issue is just dealing with the fact that we are not properly helping people who are out on the street, that it's a multitude of issues. On the one hand, we're not doing a good job enforcing laws that are actually on the book, but we're not helping people at the same time. Everybody's talking about this big revolving door with people who commit low-level crimes, go back on the street, are homeless again, recommit the crimes, and then are back on the street. And so we have I think, an issue where we need to get more affordable housing. That's part of it. We need to support people who are facing homelessness because of how expensive this city is. We have to address that. We have repeat offenders who are not being rehabilitated. Our criminal justice system is failing them, and there's no safety net. There's just this drop through right back to the street and right back into jail. And then I personally think the two biggest elements we have to look at are properly addressing and diagnosing and supporting people with mental health issues, people with substance abuse issues, people who are diagnosing and basically treating mental health issues with substances. And so things like UW putting together this new mental health hospital, we need more things like that. So the city, I think right now, the first thing we have to do is figure out how, with $5.9 billion a year in tax revenue, how we can better take care of the people who are ending up living on the street, because it is completely unacceptable. But once we come up with those programs and the ways to care for the people on the street, we also need to be able to draw that line in the sand and say, we're not allowing you to live on the street. And, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has basically come out and said sort of just that you can't criminalize living on the street if you're not providing options to care for people. So great. That means let's put the programs together that provide housing and the wraparound services of support. And then on the flip side, let's properly staff and support and train the police so that we can actually go out, enforce the laws, and, say that here is where it stops, that we're not letting this problem get any worse, but we're going to work on getting better. And then to me, a secondary issue in this city right now is just the civic outreach, and the way the council listens just needs to change. I mean, clearly, as we've seen the videos of it, there are times where the council is literally not paying attention to the people right in front of them. And we need civic outreach in this city where we're going and talking to everyone, and not just the small groups that are incredibly loud about what they want, but taking the time using technology to make sure that we can reach out to everyone in the city and not have meetings just during the day, during the week, but in the evenings and on weekends, and use social media and use other methods to really talk to everyone across Seattle, because that is not happening.
How can the city help homeless folks?
The biggest thing is to improve their services, which, first of all, in my opinion, means keep contractors responsible for deliverables. That if you are getting money from the city to help people who are homeless, who have issues with substance abuse, who have mental health issues, who need job training and don't have it, if you're one of those service providers, you need to be letting the city know, what are you doing? You know, if you're involved in transitional housing, are you actually transitioning people out of temporary housing into permanent housing? If you are meant to be contacting people to help with mental health disorders, how many people are you truly helping? And are they moving on a path to get better, or is it just a Band-Aid? And so one of the ways this city can help is if it better understands what it's getting for the amount of money it's spending, and what exactly are those outcomes that we're getting back, because they need to be better than what we're getting right now.
Another big issue they touched on earlier was transportation. How can the city help our transportation system?
I mean, obviously getting light rail throughout the city is something that is, decades behind its schedule, but hopefully we can still get there. We're pretty good with bus service, getting people downtown. One of the things that I see as a shortcoming that I hear from a lot of people is that you may be able to get downtown, but if you want to get other places, if you want to go from West Seattle to the U Village or West Seattle to Ballard, those trips are very difficult. And so we need to look at having our bus service be a little bit more inclusive, and a little bit broader than just getting everybody downtown. I think, we need to look across the board at, continuing to support Reach for the cars and Cars to Go. Being supportive of some of the rideshare programs is a good idea. I think we are definitely a multimodal city. I think there are times that we put a little too much emphasis on bike travel for parts of the city where it doesn't work. I know, talking to a lot of people who are bikers, putting time and energy into spending money to get you from West Seattle downtown via bike may not be the best way to spend dollars. And also, I think right now the idea of the First Avenue streetcar is something that would be great once we've got all of our other issues under control, but maybe not the best way to spend money right now. So I would say we're going in the right direction. But again, like with every other city department, I think it's time to do some audits and make sure that we are as lean and efficient as we can be, rather than just resting on our laurels and saying, we're a rich city, we can pay for it all, because clearly right now we can't pay for it all.
And what can the city do to help improve housing affordability?
That is such a tough question. I mean, obviously, getting money to not-for-profit developers so we can build truly affordable housing is important, because I know one thing: the more that you tear down a lot of the old stock of housing and replace it with bigger, newer buildings, it doesn't get cheaper. Specifically in West Seattle, some of the people that own small apartment buildings that have managed to keep their rents very low and managed to keep people who are at lower salaries with good housing, they're constantly getting approached by people who want to buy their space and just create bigger buildings that are newer, that are not as affordable. And so, for example, the city was trying to do with the MHA proposal something where if a developer didn't create affordable housing in a building, they would pay an in lieu of fee so that not-for-profit developers could access those funds. But I think the city failed because the in lieu of fees are way too small. There is way too much put on the developers that if you have affordable housing included in your building, you're going to have to do financial checks for those apartments for way too long. And so there's too much of incentive to pay a smaller in lieu of fee into a pot that doesn't actually get used in the neighborhood that took the upsized development. It can be used wherever. And so those in lieu of fees need to be much higher. The money needs to be able to stay in the neighborhood that took the upzoning. But I think in general, we just really need to work with current landlords, especially and current property owners that have affordable housing at a lower price, work with them to keep it that way. Create incentives so they can keep it, and then keep funding the not-for-profit development to put more units out there that can be kept at a, probably lower than market level to make sure they're affordable for as many people as possible.
We live in very polarized times nationally and also very increasingly in this city. How would you as a city leader work to bring people together?
Well, one of the things I would say is that, city council is a nonpartisan position, which in fact, I think right now is great because we have a very progressive democratic city. And I think, unfortunately, as we've seen nationally, we're having ideologues pull the conversation far to the left, far to the right. And what's getting left out is the middle. And I know all throughout District 1, I talk to people who just tell me, they're socially liberal, they're fiscally responsible, they don't want a police state, but they want enough police so that they feel safe and protected. They want to help people, but they don't want to be enabling. And I think what we're seeing is this point where people just say, let's forget about philosophy, let's forget about political ideology, and let's just meet in the middle and do things for the right reasons. When you read through the Seattle City Charter, it talks about basically efficiently, equitably, and effectively delivering services to everyone in this city. And that is completely independent of political leaning. So one of the things I'll say is that I will stand in the middle and say, look, come join me here. Let's start by making the city work properly. Let's change the way we do things so that we're not focused on the ideological arguments. We're just focusing on helping people and making Seattle a safe, healthy, prosperous city. And I'm able to do that. I'm able to listen and talk to both sides. 15 years as a public defender, I've been able to bring pretty disparate parties together to agree on things to accomplish what everybody really wants, but finds it hard because they get into arguments. And so I think I'm a very good peacemaker. I'm a very good mediator. I've got a very rational mind coming at all this from having been a physicist before I was even a lawyer. I think I've got the skills to listen and to bring people to a solution that has nothing to do with politics and everything to do with just helping people effectively.
And if people want to learn more about your campaign, where should they go?
So you can go to www.tavel, Tavel, Tavel for, F-O-R, Seattle. So just tavelforseattle.com. We're also doing Tuesdays with Tavel all around District 1, and on our website we'll have our upcoming schedule for that. And to be honest, every single Wednesday night at Calorico's in the Alaskan Junction at 8:30, I host Trivia Night. And I am there 45 to 47 Wednesdays out of the year. And in fact, on May 15th, we're celebrating my 500th Trivia Night there. So anybody ever wants to come talk to me, come to Trivia, and I will happily spend the time talking to you while I'm not answering questions or grading papers.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Hey, my pleasure, Jason. It was really my pleasure. I enjoyed it.
You've been listening to Talk to Seattle. I've been your host, Jason Rigden. If you want to support the show, why don't you follow us on social media? We are at Talk to Seattle on both Instagram and Twitter. Thank you for listening.